America's love affair with the automobile. As overused as this phrase may be, the automobile is undeniably as much a symbol of the American way of life as baseball or the 4th of July. And few cities are more closely aligned with the automobile industry than is Kenosha. Beginning in 1902, when Thomas Jeffrey began manufacturing his one-cylinder gas-powered buggy, through the eras of Nash, American Motors, Renault, Chrysler, and now Daimler Chrysler, Kenosha has remained a car town. And for nearly 70 of those years, the Pullman family, like Kenosha, has staked its future and its fortunes on the automobile.
As a kid growing up in Kenosha in a car town, it was a pretty good experience, pretty neat opportunity. But a kid growing up in a car town in a car family was even a neater experience.
During the early 1930s, Charles Nash was producing 138,000 cars a year in his Kenosha factories. And Howard Pullman, Andy's grandfather, was dreaming of the day when he too would own his own business. By the time he graduated from high school, Howard's plans were in place. In 1935, he opened a small automotive repair shop and gas station at 2714 Roosevelt Road. A year later, Nash became Nash Kelvinator, and Howard Pullman hired his first employee, Rolly Hafer.
We worked pretty close to the belly in those days. But then, you know, the times started getting better all the time. I mean, people weren't working for 40 cents an hour anymore.
Since Rolly only worked evenings and weekends, Howard pretty much ran the place himself, although he would always look up whenever Marge Evans walked by on her way to work. 2 years later, in 1938, Howard and Margie were married. It wasn't long before Howard was challenged with growing a business and supporting a family. Ron Pullman was born in 1939. It was about this time that Howard hired his second employee, Kenny Merchant. Then came December 7th, 1941. Within weeks, Nash Kelvinator's Kenosha factories were turning out aircraft engines and propellers. The station stayed open during the war, although often there wasn't much to sell.
Cut the use of your car. Save its tires by driving slowly and by driving less.
The Pullman household continued to grow. A daughter, Barbara, was born in 1943, and Roger came along 3 years later. After the war, pent-up demand for new cars led Nash to expand its Kenosha factory, and Howard moved his business to a larger location next door to Vigansky's appliance store.
I was about 12, 13 years old, and Howard expanded and moved over to be our next-door neighbor to the west on 36th and Roosevelt Road, and it was primarily a gas station, a service station, kind of an outfit, and if Howard ever was paid $1 per time he wiped the windshield, he'd make $1 million just doing that.
Kenosha prospered during the 50s. Nash introduced the Rambler, and in 1954 merged with Hudson to become American Motors. Howard Pullman decided it was time to expand his business. First, it was an occasional used car.
He emphasized many times that the largest inventory I'll ever have is 5 cars. 5 cars is enough.
In '57, Dad did take on the GMC franchise, so he could sell the one bus probably every other year to St. Mary's Catholic Church.
By 1962, AMC was producing 500,000 cars a year. Its workforce grew to 14,000, and Kenosha boasted the 18th highest family income in the nation. Howard became a Studebaker dealer, and a new car showroom was added to the old gas station. But Pullman Motors was still a small operation, and Howard realized the tiny dealership didn't have much to offer his sons. Ron, after graduating from Carthage College, married Kathy and took a job teaching high school math in Minneapolis.
Teaching was really a good fit for Ron. It seemed just a natural thing. He liked people, and it was perfect for him rather than staying at home and entering the family business.
During the 60s, Ron and Kathy began to build a life for themselves in Minneapolis, raising their 3 children, Suzanne, Andy, and John. Roger joined the Army, and Howard continued to run the business by himself.
Early on, I remember visiting my grandparents in Kenosha, and notoriously my grandmother would sit me down and say, "Okay, Andy," at about 5 years old, she'd ask me what I wanted to do. Did I want to stay with her for the day, because that included going to the beauty parlor, or did I want to go with Grandpa? And of course, going over to the shop, as we referred to it in those days, was definitely my choice. Don't remember a lot of conversation with him, but I remember people respected him.
When Roger got out of the service in 1968, he returned to Kenosha and began selling cars with his father. Then, a year later, much to the surprise of everyone, Pullman Motors was offered a Chrysler Plymouth franchise.
Little tiny gas station turned dealership, and I can remember when Chrysler came and they introduced their Fifth Avenue. They had the TVs there. It was just really kind of unique. And you look at this, all the other mega dealers, and here we had little Pullman Motors, you know. And
I think our first year we sold 40 of them. Were we real successful? I think we did enough to stay in the business.
Pullman Motors' relationship with Chrysler has lasted to this day. But the man who started it all with that little gas station would see only a brief part of it. Howard Pullman died in 1971 at the age of 54. Howard's death meant the Pullman family had to make some difficult decisions, and Ron was the eldest son.
It wasn't a difficult decision at all for him to come home. He really knew what he needed to do at that time. He needed to be home to help with the family business.
At first, there was some question as to whether he would keep it going or, sell her down and lock it up. But I think at the time he fell in love with the car business and just decided to give it a go.
And Ron told me one time that, just wait, it'll just take a couple of years and I'll have everything going great. And that didn't really exactly happen that way.
Over the next few years, Ron and Roger worked long and hard to grow the tiny dealership and provide for their families. By that time, Roger and his wife Terry had 3 sons, Mike, Danny, and Tony. But through it all, the 2 brothers never wavered from their father's principles of treating their customers and their employees like family.
He knew our family, we were neighbors and so forth, and we went in there and I said, "This is what we would like," and he says, "Sure, let me look at it for you," and he told us what he would recommend for us, and we trusted him.
We had our Christmases in their house, and we sat around their Christmas tree in their family room, and it was really nice.
I didn't know my grandfather, but I know my dad had the vision to grow the business. And he also took care of the customers, and he took care of the people who, worked for the company.
Soon, these principles and business practices began to pay off. Dodge cars and trucks were added in 1974, and a year later, the brothers bought a Dodge dealership in Racine, which Roger ran. It was about this time that Ron's son, Andy, following the family tradition, began working at the dealership after school and during the summer.
Dad worked a lot of hours, and when he was over at the business a lot, I think I soon found that by working over there, it was one way to get closer to him and to be around him.
When I worked with Andy side by side as porters, it was no different. He as an employee than any other employee. Like I say, he had that enthusiasm.
Ultimately, the business kind of got in me.
Andy went into the manager aspect of the training, and I went into the technical aspect, and here we are, we're still here. 20 years later, we're still doing it,
In late '77, with an eye to the future, Ron took a chance and purchased 5 acres on Highway 50.
And he thought at that time that he had to do something, whether Chrysler stayed and business got better, or we just had to improve what we had. And we actually came out here one day with Ron, and we walked the lot and jumped the mud puddles in the ground and stuff and talked about where this building was going to be setting.
Then came 1980, and things began to get shaky. Interest rates were high, gasoline was expensive, and people simply weren't buying cars.
There were some lean times. It was looking scary for a while there. But it was looking bad all across the board for Kenosha. But we were hit pretty good because we were a Chrysler dealer when Chrysler going under.
The worst thing was really the uncertainty of the future, not knowing what was going to happen. So I looked for a job at that time, and I just, out of frustration, I think, thought maybe I can help in some way, seeing him being frustrated.
I was in junior high, and it just kind of dawned on me that she was getting a job to help out at home with the bills and things like that. And that was the one time that, you know, I saw it wasn't always an easy thing, owning or having a family business.
But Chrysler, under the leadership of Lee Iacocca, and with the help of that famous government loan bailout, began to turn things around. It wasn't long before the future was again looking bright for the Paulmans and for Kenosha. The Racine dealership was sold, and Ron and Roger began to prepare for the move to Highway 50. In 1986, when Chrysler purchased AMC and Chrysler cars began to roll off Kenosha assembly lines, the brothers knew that time was right. Ground was broken for the new dealership in February '87, and on October 23rd, Ron and Roger's dream was realized.
It was kind of a neat opening we had here. We had Golden Strings from Tremper High School here. You know, we put on a pretty big show when this place opened up, and you know, and everybody that worked here was a part of that.
After years of struggling to simply stay in business, Paulman Motors had finally made it to the big leagues. But then, only 2 months and 4 days later, another bomb was dropped on Kenosha and the Paulman family. On January 27, 1988, Chrysler announced it would end automobile assembly in Kenosha. 5,300 workers lost their jobs.
We thought we were going to probably go out of business, you know, because we just built a brand new place. We had big debt.
But we held together. Ron got us together. He, you know, gave us a pep talk, and we just kept plugging away, and we worked through it, and here we are today.
In 1989, Ron Paulman purchased Granger Oldsmobile, and Andy, then a district manager for Chrysler in Denver, Colorado, moved back to Kenosha to run the new operation.
When I came back to Kenosha, my wife knew that I had big ideas. I didn't want to be a small dealer. Passionate about being back in Kenosha, and really wanted everybody in Kenosha to be in a Paulman Motors car.
Ron was happy. The dealership was doing great. We had a wonderful staff, and we really enjoyed life, and he could relax a little bit.
Then, unexpectedly, on November 13, 1990, Ron Paulman died at the age of 51. For Roger Paulman, it was time to make a change. He sold his interest in the family business and opened his own Chevrolet dealership in Union Grove.
When my dad died, a little piece of all of us died. But it was kind of interesting because in a very short period of time, I realized that the spirit of Paulman Motors was actually stronger. And I saw a lot of wonderful employees that realized that the family was in a difficult situation, but they really were willing to stick around. And that spirit really is what got us motivated and excited in the early 90s to say, let's take this business forward.
In the years since, Paulman Motors has continued to grow. More land was purchased along Highway 50. A 20,000 square foot addition expanded the service and parts department. Cadillac and Kia franchises were added, and a 14,000 square foot used car and Kia sales center was built.
At the time, it was a large endeavor for the family, but I think the Paulman reputation of being able to take care of customers had a lot to do with our confidence in his ability to get the job done. And it was really, the expansion was driven by just his desire to continue taking care of customers. Nothing's held him back since.
In 2001, 2 dealerships were purchased in Racine: Schaefer Pontiac Jeep Saab and Bell Dodge, the same dealership the Paulmans had sold in 1984. John Paulman, who, like his brother Andy, joined the family business after working as a Chrysler district manager, directs the Racine operations.
When we came to Racine, there were a lot of people who were a little uneasy. They didn't know what to expect. But day by day, I think the team here at Schaefer and at Bell saw quickly that our two organizations are very much alike.
We aren't a micromanaging dealership. We don't want to look over everybody's shoulder. I'm not back fixing cars myself. I'm not selling every car myself. We want to hire people that are better than the rest and really understand the value of our customer relationships.
They're treated like family.